Okay, so this first lesson is about sentence fragments. Now, a sentence fragment is something that lacks a subject or a verb or just does not express a complete thought. Okay, so for example, all day on the beach. Okay, we don't know what happened on the beach or who did it. If we add a subject and a verb to this, it becomes we played all day on the beach. Now that's a complete sentence, it's a complete thought. Some sentences some fragments have a subject and a verb, but they still do not express a complete thought. If we take a look at this one, as Jake was eating ice cream. Now, the subject is Jake, was eating is the verb, but this still does not express a complete thought. We're waiting for more information because of the word as there, and we'll talk about that. That's something called a subordinating conjunction, and it makes this a dependent clause. It depends on more information to complete it. As Jake was eating ice cream, he saw his ex-girlfriend. Now we have a sentence that is a complete thought. Now, it's easy to spot fragments when they're just alone sitting on a screen, but when they're embedded within your actual writing in paragraphs, it's a little more difficult. I love going skydiving on beautiful days whenever I visit Hawaii. I go with an instructor, but maybe someday I will get certified to jump alone. So here we have a short paragraph, and there is a fragment in there, but it's a little more difficult to spot. The best way to find fragments is to read each sentence individually, look at it individually, and ask yourself if it can stand alone as a complete thought. So when we break these up into three, we can see here that of these three, that one that says whenever I visit Hawaii, that is an incomplete thought. And the way to fix fragments is to combine them. Usually fragments are just kind of broken off from a main sentence, and so to fix them you just combine them with whatever thought that they were broken off from. So in this case, I love going skydiving on beautiful days whenever I visit Hawaii. So that's how that is corrected in that case. Okay, one way to fix fragments, or I should say one way to spot fragments, is to do what I call the random person test. And that's, imagine yourself, if you have a sentence in question, you're wondering if it's a complete thought, imagine yourself going up to someone, a random person on the street, and saying that sentence. Would that person be able to make sense of what you have said? Would it be something complete and self-contained? So let's try this out. I'd eat a lot of chocolate if I am nervous or bored. So let's say we're suspicious of these two sentences and we want to try out the random person test. If I were to go up to a random person and say, I eat a lot of chocolate, does that make sense in and of itself? Is that a self-contained thought? And yes, it is. I eat a lot of chocolate. Somebody could make, if I went up and said that, they could make sense of what I'm saying. If I were to go up to someone and say, if I am nervous or bored, does that express a complete thought? And hopefully you can hear that that does not express a complete thought, and that is indeed a fragment. So the way to fix it is, I eat a lot of chocolate if I am nervous and bored. We just combine them. So there's a few areas that kind of create problem. There's sort of problem areas where fragments seem to pop up. And the first one is introductory phrases, add-on phrases at the end of a sentence, and something called subordinating conjunctions. So let's look at each one of these individually. So introductory phrases. Walking past the house, the mailman noticed the dog was off its leash. Now reading it fluently like that, it seems to blend together nicely. But if we were to read alone, walking past the house, that introductory phrase, we would see that that is where the fragment is. And in order to correct it, in this case we have a comma after that introductory phrase, but it's combined into one complete sentence. Okay, the next one is add-on phrases. I love reading good books, especially when I am not assigned to read them. Okay, so this, especially when I'm not assigned to read them, is a phrase that's been tagged onto the end of a sentence, and it cannot stand alone. It is a fragment, and it is fixed by again, just combining the sentences with a comma. I felt like an outcast, living on the edge of society. Here's another one of those tag-on phrases at the end, and it's fixed by combining it with the main clause there. Okay, the third problem area are these subordinating conjunctions. And if you remember in the lesson on meet the sentence, this is the kind of conjunction where if a sentence begins with this conjunction, it has to have it's called a dependent clause, and it needs an independent clause to complete the thought. So whenever I go back home, I hang out with my high school friends. Whenever I go back home does not stand alone. We're waiting for more information. What happens when you go back home? So that is a dependent clause. Starting the subordinating conjunction begins the sentence. It creates a dependent clause, and it needs to be combined with that independent clause there to be a complete thought. Let's look at some more examples just to get the feel for this. I hang out with my friends from high school whenever I go back home. Now, in this case, the dependent clause is on the end of the sentence. The subordinating conjunction is there in the middle, but it doesn't matter. It still is a fragment, and that's fine. We can have the phrases in that order, but in that case, it would be combined and it would not use a comma. We'll talk about why when we talk about the comma rules. Here's another example. Because I have never had good vision, I will never make a good pilot. That first clause there, that dependent clause beginning with the subordinating conjunction, that is not a complete thought. I would recommend going back and looking at those subordinating conjunctions and just trying out. Start out sentences with those words and see how there's kind of a pause there in the middle and you need that extra sentence to complete the thought. There's the fragment, and there is the fix. Okay, so stylistic fragments. Professional writers, especially literary type writers, will often use fragments in their writing intentionally. The difference is they know they're doing it. They're doing it for a specific reason, for a specific effect in their writing, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. It's not like they're breaking a commandment or something, but the fact is they know why they're breaking the rule. They know why they're doing it. So, for example, if we were to have this, never try drugs, not even once. That second part there is a fragment, but it kind of adds a little bit of drama to have it there as its own separate sentence. Okay, so that's the lesson on fragments. Remember, if you want Okay, so that's the lesson on fragments. Remember that there are practice exercises as a part of the lesson that you can just download there in PDF, or if you want a hard copy, printed copy of the workbook that this course is based on, those are available at Amazon.com for around $12, I believe. Okay, thanks for watching. Now on to the next lesson.